The great ones, they're different. They really are. Not better, just different. Sure, there's a physical power, a mental strength, a complex but resolute constitution too. There's a whole lot more than just the measurables. That's something else, that intangible. It separates us from them. Welcome to the Legends series on Andy Raymond Unfiltered. 30 years interviewing sportsmen. It's amazing, at times educational, sometimes disappointing too. Then there's times like this, sitting down with one of my childhood heroes, but chatting, laughing and reminiscing like old mates. On the field, he was the rarest of talents. Off it, he's a role model and an absolute gentleman. But who is Mick Cronin?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably someone who was born in Gerringong and never wanted to leave.
Do you still love your footy in 2021 because it's been a long journey?
Look, I've just given up coaching Gerringong this year, and I've coached them the last 12 years in first grade. And people sort of said, you're giving it away. I said, well, I'm at the age where I think it's probably time, and I probably eliminated a few coaching careers in Gerringong, and plenty of people like the job. But that's, I'd really just think of some time for somebody else because I've really enjoyed the last 12 years.
Where does your footballing journey begin? What year?
Look, Gerringong's a mad football town,
Yep.
and I can remember my father taking me to watch a first grade grand final in 1956. I can't remember the game, but I can remember me taking me. A lot of the people who come to the football, and they were relations, all rugby league footballers. My father loved the game, so
Yep.
from an early age, born into rugby league.
You played first grade with Gerringong, am I right in saying as a 16-year-old?
Now, that'd be one of those exaggerations, but I was 17. I was actually
Okay.
17. I was 17.
Your first year, you scored 316 points in just 20 games. Were you always going to be something special as a rugby league player, or didn't you realise what you had?
Look, that's probably the second year I played, actually, that number of points. But look, there was a broadcaster in Wollongong at the age of 12 said I'd play for Australia. And it was not something I never thought about. And I thought, this is one of these blokes saying something. Look, my ambition as a young bloke growing up was to play first grade for Gerringong. Seriously, never had dreams outside of that. All my heroes were people who played football for Gerringong, And actually, one of them went on to play for Australia. Actually, a bloke by the name of Paul Quinn.
Yes.
Well, he's a relation, actually, my mother's first cousin. But so as I said, I was always around football. I'd come to the pub and go and watch the games. But no, I never had great dreams. As I said, my dream was to play football for Gerringong.
Who and when was the first offer to move to Sydney and play in the New South Wales Rugby League as it was?
1970. That was my second year in Gerringong. Kevin Humphries came and saw me after a game in Kiama. I just said I'm not interested in going to Sydney. Simple as that. And there was no long conversation. I think made it clear. But so that was the first.
What was the reasoning? It wasn't your love? You were playing for fun?
Loved the game. I thought I'd probably play for Gerringong for 20 years.
Yeah.
But no, it wasn't. Loved Gerringong. Always thought I'd live in Gerringong. That was simple. To play football in Sydney, well, always the thing was you had to go to Sydney, so to speak, and that wasn't where I wanted to be living. So, and it never really worried me at that stage,
We'll rewind back to 1973, an amazing year. You first represented country in city country. Then you became a very rare member of a club that got selected to play for Australia from what we term bush footy. Not just selected either. You went on a Kangaroo tour, played 2 tests and 10 club games. Was that a dream come true?
Well, as I said, I never had that. And look, I've got to be honest, that was the toughest. The week I got selected was the toughest week of my life because I hadn't played great in the lead-up games,
Okay.
realistically. There was a bloke here called Kevin Walsh. He was an Australian selector, and he stuck for me. But I'd played with his son since I was about 10 or 11, so he'd seen me play all my life, and he had more faith in me than I probably had in myself. But his previous 2 people he'd picked from the country were Paul Quinn, who ended up playing for Newtown, and a bloke called Tony Branson.
Yes.
So I was probably the third one, but that was the toughest week of my life. That week I got picked because the day after I got picked, the first phone call that morning was about 6 o'clock. And the first question was, how's it feel to be the most criticised selection ever? Now, this was a bloke from the country who'd never never spoken to anyone about anything realistically. Yeah. I felt like saying, oh, gee, that's a good question. But I had an answer today, but I didn't have a real good answer then.
Where rugby league is now, it is amazing to think that guys could be selected from the country back in the 70s.
Well, it could. It was a lead up. You had a country divisional championship. You picked to play for country. Like country'd go and play 3 games in Queensland, or sometimes 3 games in Sydney before they went to play the Sydney side. But yeah, today they're looking at everyone by the time they're 15 or 16. Yeah. I think the last person to do it might have been Slippery Morris, actually.
Yeah, another South Coast boy.
From Dapdale, yeah. I think he might have did it from Dapdale.
Who was your roommate on the 73 Kangaroo tour?
Would you believe it? I had a room to myself.
Did you really? The young bloke, a room to himself?
Yeah, but I got a lot of knock on my doors. Other people wanted to know what the room being used.
You were playing and touring with some of the greats of the game. What did you learn from the Kangaroo tour?
I didn't learn that I was a better player, because I didn't have a lot of confidence, I've got to be honest. But what I learnt was they weren't as good as I thought they were in some ways.
Yeah.
Look, what I'm saying, there are champions. I mean, we look at the likes of Langlands and Fulton and other places, Beats and O'Reilly. They were stand out in their positions. But when I started playing in some of the games, I thought, these people, and a lot of these blokes aren't any different to me. But I always remember early on, it was probably a bit of a different tour, that one. There were some established blokes and then like everything. But in Derringong, I'd probably do what I like. In the fact that, not so much, that was just how you played those days.
Yeah.
I used to chip kick a bit, but I remember one day, the first early in England, I chip kicked. And I didn't think anything too much of it. And after the game, Bill Hamilton walked up to me. And he was a big support on that tour to me in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
He said, I leave the chip kicking to Bobby Fulton and Graham Langlands. I might have been from the country. I wasn't stupid. I said, I'll cop the tip.
Was it overwhelming to be touring with guys like that and mates with guys like that?
Well, 28. I don't know whether... But look, I got reasonably well accepted. I can't complain about my treatment. There's probably some people on that tour who could, but I couldn't complain about it. I started to play reasonably well to the state. Well, they thought, this bloke can play a little bit, you know. So I wasn't the biggest drawback in the side, so to speak. So then you become accepted. But, you sort of, I was pretty quiet. But, I had no dramas on the tour. But as I said, you're looking out there and you watch a lot, and I'm not, Fulton, the first thing I know about Fulton is such a great trainer, After he's finished, he'd be doing extra sprints or extra... And I don't think it was a fluke that he was so quick off the mark.
Yeah.
He did those 10, 15 metre sprints religiously and other, So, and you learn, and you watch the good players and watch what they do.
There's a big difference between Gerringong 1973 to the UK 1973. I mean, that's a huge life experience for you.
Well, I wouldn't have been on a plane till that year when I flew out with the countryside to go and tour in Queensland. So that would have been the first. So to go over to England, well, it is very educational, you might say. I learned a lot of things that maybe I shouldn't have learnt, but and I enjoyed it, and I said a lot of good blokes there, and you have a lot, I mean, they're all good blokes, but there's a lot of different ones. I remember on that tour, my father used to always tell me that the English players were better player than us. Not so much better, but they always said they were smarter, in a lot of ways. I remember I met a bloke called Vince Corralius, the father spoke of, and terrorised Australia apparently in the late 50s. I walked to a game with him, I don't know why, but we walked and he said, explain the game to me better in 2 minutes than anyone ever had to a degree.
Wow.
He said, I could still play against you Australians today. He said, you do nothing with the football. Meaning, he said, the game's this simple. He said, when your side got the football, he said, you try and put your players where the opposition's not. He said, when the opposition's got the football, he said, you try and put your players where they are. I said, geez, mate, you just summed up the game. And he summed it up in 2 minutes, and you sort of then you watch and learn, and that's what they were good at those days. But then Australia got fitter, smarter, and probably more professional. But like realistically, that was 73, and I think the last English side to win a Test series was 1970.
Yes.
I actually played against them the day after they won the third Test for Southern Division, actually.
A touring game?
Yeah, I played for Southern Division, and we played them the day after they won the third Test, and Malcolm O'Reilly and I think Cliffy played. They terrorised us. I think they might have come straight from the party straight to Wollongong. I'm not too sure.
Any elite athlete will tell you it takes more than just being physically fit to be at your best. And our friends at Galaxy Finance can have you at the top of your financial game. From home loans to investments and self-managed super funds, they provide complete solutions. Call Galaxy Finance on 1300 91 7740 and mention you heard it on Andy Raymond Unfiltered to get an obligation-free chat to see how Galaxy Finance can assist you. How many offers were there to come to Sydney and play, and from which clubs?
Probably, I always remember, well, I can't remember him just trying. He was the boss of Eastern Club Herbs at the time.
Ronnie Jones, perhaps?
Ronnie Jones rang me and he said, look, he just said, would you like, I thought you might like to come to Sydney. I said, no, I'm not interested. He said, I thought you might like to cash in on the Kangaroo tour. I said, no, thanks for the offer, but I'm happy with that, and I probably, as a St. George, but probably because you're a local in North Sydney. I was always a North Sydney supporter. I was a North Sydney supporter all my life, actually.
A Bears man?
I was a Bears man, actually, yeah. And Timmy pick up too, because I became good mates with Timmy. Timmy was a bit of a character, but he tried to get me to go to North and he tried to get me to go to Canterbury, actually.
Did you actually have a verbal agreement with Canterbury at one stage?
Well, look, you do silly things when you think you know what you're going to do. And I did. I spoke to Peter Moore, and he seemed like a good bloke. He was.
Yep.
I enjoyed it. He was a funny bloke. But I said, look, if I ever come to Sydney, I'll come to Canterbury. I think I made this statement in 1975, actually.
Okay. Thinking
I'd never come. And then the process with Terry Fearnley probably started in 75, the end of 75. He first come and saw me, and I never ever thought any more about it. But when I finally decided, well, actually, I was always looking for ways to he was too good for me, Terry Fearnley. He wore me down. But, and that's what impressed me about him in some ways. That's probably another story to a degree. But when I finally decided to go, I said, look, but I'll give him a word to Peter Moore that if I go to Sydney, I'll go to Canterbury. Now, if he holds me to that, I said, I won't be going. Simple as that. I said, if he holds me to it, I said, I'll stay in Gerringong.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I'll go and see Bullfrog. And at the time, there was a 13 import rule.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, they had one spot open. They were keeping it open for Keith Harris. So Bullfrog said, I won't hold him to that. Yeah.
Why in 1977, why did you decide that was the right year, the right time and the right club?
I don't know whether it was the right year or the right time, but I played disgraceful in 1976. There was no international football that year. But I was disgraceful, and I wasn't training. All of a sudden was getting a little bit harder. And my brother always said I should go. He was a smarter one in the family, only for the fact that when I come out of school and playing for Gerringong, he said, get them to give you something to say. If you ever want to leave, they're not going to hold you. Yeah. I said, I'm never going to want to leave. Anyway, when I was 17, he went and got it. He went and got a thing. I've still got a little bit of paper saying, if you ever want to leave, there'll be no transfer fee or no, we'll never hold you. So he sort of said to me to go, but I still wasn't. But Fearnley first come and saw me. Then what impressed me about him, after they qualified for the 1976 grand final, he come and saw me the day after. And I'm thinking, geez, if I was at a side in the grand final, I would be coming to Gerringong to see me.
Yeah.
The day after they got beat, he was here again. And I'm looking for ways to get him.
Yep.
I pulled them all out. I pulled that one out. I pulled out the one. I said, look, I won't be able to start training until February. I said, busy in the pub over that holiday period. I pulled them all out. But he said, no, it won't be a problem. I said, look, I'll ring you back in a month. I'll give you an answer in a month. Pub was different then. The phones were on the wall. Yep. I said, I'm going to ring this bloke, tell him I'm not going. I'm serious. As I'm picking the phone off he walked in the back door. Start all over again. In the end, I said, look, I'll go. I said, you're too good for me. I said, I'll go anyway. So, and that's funny. I said, look, I've had a bit of an injury this year too. He said, I'll get to see a bloke in Auburn. And I went and saw him anyway. He came to me when I was there seeing the bloke. He said, look, will you sign this contract? He said, they won't believe you're coming unless you sign the contract. I said, look, I told you I'm coming. I won't. He said, I said, I'll sign it. Yeah, so I signed the contract. Probably the only one ever signed. But he said, they won't believe you're coming unless you sign the contract. So, but he wore me down. As I said, there's a couple of things where you've got to sign the grand final and nothing more than that.
Your first year in the Big Smoke was 77. Parramatta won the minor premiership. They played a grand final as well, but drew with St George, who would then win the replay. So close in that first year, yet so far.
Well, it was. I mean, my first couple of games were disgraceful too. A couple of trials, and it was always a bit of a joke about my mother. She won some money on the poker machine. It's her only vice, and she'd have to be away from dinner. She was playing the poker machines, and the bloke said jokingly, said, "Oh, you're taking away our money." He said, "We've got to use that to pay that useless Cronin." And my mother, he looked at him and she wrote a name, had to write a name in the book, and she said, "You're not." She said, "I am." But yeah, look, they were the one side that we probably had trouble with all year.
Yeah.
But as I said, look, if I kick a goal, we win the game. So there was nothing in it. But I mean, I've always believed that shouldn't be replays in those games. You should just play to the end, either way.
Yep.
And I reckon the following week, it was the flattest week, But then, and they come out and they just got off to a fly. And like we were down the week before, I think 9-0 at half time, got back to 9-0. But they were, all the young blokes are enthusiastic, and we just, it's one of them. But you don't win them all, and you got to,
You'd go on to win 4, obviously, but you lost 2 in 77 and 84. But by just a couple of points. Does time heal those old wounds?
No, I got to be honest. I always say, you just file the wins away. It's the losses that keep coming back to haunt you. It's funny. It's funny how they annoy us. Even like in coaching in Gerringong, the losses annoy you because the wins are there. They're there for everyone to see. You haven't got to worry about them. But it's funny, after the first grand final, we got beaten. I was back at the club after. Well, this woman came up to me. She said, "You wouldn't have the hide to come back next year, would you?" I said, "I hadn't really thought about it." I'm serious. I said, "I hadn't really thought about it." I said, at this stage, but yeah, it's funny. And look, the fans, if you got to like them when they're good, you got to put up with them when they're bad.
Your first 2 years, top point scorer and winner of the Rothmans medal. Bloody easy, this professional football. Is that how it felt?
Oh, no, I can't say. But I always enjoyed playing the game, and I reckon. And what I think I figured out, is that if you use the players around you, they can help you. If you use the smart ones, and they'll help you play. But it's funny, the first Rothmans medal, you get an invitation to go, and I said, "Look, I'm not going." I said, "I can't stand these things. They won't forget me." The day of the Rothmans medal, the bloke rings up, boss of the league, and look, he said, "You going to the Rothmans medal?" I said, "Oh, no." I said, "I don't need another trip up. I'm going up 3 times, 4 times a week."
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, look, we'd like you to come." I said, "Look, I'm not." No, I said, "Look, He said, "It'll be embarrassing if you don't come." As I said, I'm from the country, but I'm not that slow.
Yes.
So then I had to go and try and find a suit.
Oh, dear.
And the woman told me, this is what they're all wearing. Well, when I got there, I think I was the only one wearing it.
Is that right? You're the odd one out.
No, there was plenty of ones there, but it wouldn't have been one I'd have picked if I'd have been picking myself.
Yeah. Back in 1977, I mean, you were still living in Gerringong, and as you said, you were making the trip. What was the daily commute for you? Because that's before the freeway and a whole lot of things.
It was probably a couple of hours, wasn't, but
okay.
It was my decision to do it, so I don't worry about it. But like, you'd work in the pub till 12 o'clock on a Friday night. We'd train at 8 o'clock Saturday morning. I'd go up to training. I'd come back and work to maybe 10 that night. Then I'd drive back to Sydney that night. I hated travelling on the day of the game, just in case something went wrong or something. So I wanted to be in Sydney just so I was a cab fare away if I didn't want to be stuck in. The fact we got no cabs in Gerringong, it would have been a long... But that was it. But it never worried me because it was my own decision and only ever 1 year at a time. It was always 1 year at a time.
Something special was building in blue and gold with the experience and the hard heads. There was a young group emerging. Peter Sterling, Brett Kenny, Steve Ella, Eric Groth, the list goes on and on. Did you realise at the time just how good these kids were?
Look, you don't... Well, Sterling come earlier, and as I said, Groth, 90, I think 77 he's running around in the under 20. But he could always he'd always have something wrong with his knee, Eric. But Ella played his first game in 79 in first grade. In his second first grade game, I think it's his second, did his knee. He never played for 18 months. But Jack had coached him in the New South Wales side, so Jack had an opinion of him.
Yes.
Kenny, in 1980, Bob O'Reilly and Beatson came to me and said, "You should get here early." I just wanted to get there half an hour before the game, or 40 minutes, be dressed and ready to go. They said, you should get here early and watch this bloke play, this Brett Kenny. They said, he can play. Well, it wasn't long after that he was in reserve grade. Not long after that he's in first grade. I always used to joke with Brett. I said, the game's too easy for you. I said, it's not fair. But so you knew there was something special, and not so much special, but you knew they could play. And look, we were fortunate enough, like that 80 side, we had a good side in 80 and we never made the semis.
Yeah.
Different, Pricey got injured and different things happened. But and we probably missed out on one game. But you knew we had plenty of talent there, and Jack come, and then... Look, Fernley should have won a comp, realistically.
Yeah, I agree.
76, 77, and even 78, we weren't that far away, but in the end it was probably our fault we got beat. But he deserved to win a comp, Terry. But Jack always said to me, he said, I come here because I knew with Terry being here, everything could be in place.
And it was, because Jack arrived in 1981.
Yeah.
What was the difference that you could see?
Probably those young footballers.
Was it? Yeah.
Oh, look, Jack used to always say, he said, I notice the better the players, the better I coach.
Yeah.
So, and you got Kenny. He was a freak, Kenny. Ella the same. Growth. Sterling, just a complete footballer. And you had the likes of Price and Edge and all, Hilditch, O'Reilly. Steve
Ella's the one that probably doesn't get the credit for just how good he was, because there were so many of you guys around him.
I mean, today, if he was playing today with all the coverage, and 8 games, everyone had realised. But in those days, there's one game on TV. It's like a lot of Eric Rowe's best stuff. It was chasing people and running them down. They drag out one or two, but there's a lot more than that of where he chased blokes for 70 or 80 metres and to the other side of the field. From everywhere. He was. We always used to say he's quicker chasing than he is running.
Yes.
Of course, he had to run fast to catch some, but when he only had to go as quick as he had to, they were big in those days on, get stuff on the ground where you got to get up and go for 5 metres. I said, Eric's the only bloke who can get up and be in front after 2 and behind after 4. he could pull up. He could pull up as quick as he could start. But look, in some ways, they're all characters. In some ways, they might be like they might be your TV personalities like that, but they're all characters within the club and within the setup. And they're all a few comedians amongst them. And Paul Taylor, he was just a bloke everyone wanted in the side, but didn't fit them. He didn't fit what they thought the fullback should be doing. But those who played with him they wanted Paul Taylor there.
In part 2 of the Mick Cronin story, premierships, that Arthur beats and punch, and the unfair expectations placed on the modern-day player. If you're enjoying Andy Raymond Unfiltered, we'd love a 5-star rating and review on whatever app you're listening on. Best weekly review wins an unfiltered trucker's hat too. The Mick Cronin story will continue. Make sure you come back soon, legends. Welcome back to Andy Raymond Unfiltered. Mick Cronin, the game's gentleman, part 2. Previously, we've spoken about his reluctance to move to Sydney, which clubs approached him before the Eels, and the tours. The story continues. The 1981 Premiership defeated Newtown 20 points to 11. Your first Premiership with the Eels' first Premiership. How special was that?
When Jack Gibson, after the 80 grand final, and I'd met Jack once before, and I always remember he said, you don't say much. I thought, you haven't told me too much either in this conversation so far. But I thought, well. So after this 1980 grand final, I ran into him I was with Johnny Lang, I ran into him after the grand final, in Canterbury, and he started talking, he said, what do you want out of football? I said, I want to win a premiership, Jack. He said to Lang, he said, I think I've got myself a centre here. Yeah, that's all he said. But we never said anything about that again. But when we won in 82, he came up to me and said, you got greedy. I knew straight away what he meant. Yeah. And he knew, but I always thought, oh, geez, he's got a good memory, Jack. I always said I played football to win premiership.
Yes.
So if I'd have went through my whole career, never won one, I know I'd have missed out on something, But that's what I always played for at the start of the year. You're playing with your mates, blokes and that's what it's about.
1981, you defeated Newtown. 1982, you defeated Manly. 1983, you defeated Manly. And you look at the score lines of the games, and there wasn't many points scored compared to what we see now. Very different game.
Well, the game's different. I always remember once Manly beat us. Someone asked me a question. Manly beat us twice in the in the semis, I think, both those years by a big margin. They said, how do you come back from that? I said, well, you look around the room. I said, you look around the room and I see Ray Price, Brett Kenny, Steve Ella, Sterling, Growth, and all that. I said, I always think we got something in our favour.
Yes.
You know? I said, we weren't foolproof. We can have a bad game, but you always knew that if all things are going fair, we're going to be hard to beat.
A wonderful era in rugby league, wasn't it, the early 80s, especially for us Parramatta tragics?
Well, it is, but I mean, look, I'm a rugby league tragic, so people say, oh, it's better then. I said, look, I'd hate to think that people now weren't enjoying rugby league. I mean, I can find problems with the game in some ways, but I mean, I still love the game. The fact I'm just finished coaching suggests that, you know.
It's a long association, isn't it? But it's someone else's turn now, you were saying.
Well, when I said I've coached, the previous 8 years I'd coached the junior sides from 11 through to 18, so it wasn't just those other 12. There was probably 8 or 9 before that, you know. So I just thought, when you think of it, it's 12 years, you have wiped out a few coaching careers of other people, so I just thought it was time.
1986, one of the most famous grand finals, 4-2 over Canterbury. What are your recollections of the day?
Look, my recollections of this, that I'd hate to think if people watched that game and thought that was as good as I could play football, because I hurt my eye early that year.
That was in a trial match.
And I'm blind in one eye, so it was sort of a struggle. And once it happened and the doctor said, look, your eye's buggered, I said, well, that's it, I'm finished. But, you know, it started to heal a bit, and I said, I'll think about it, and started running around. And Pricey and a couple others said, you might as well sort of finish off. So I've got to thank Pricey for it. I said, I'll give it a go and see how it goes. But
you're ready to walk away mid-season?
No, when I hurt my eye, I said, that's it. Because the doctor said, look, your eye's buggered.
Yep.
He said, you know, so you sort of think, well, if I come back and lose the other eye, that's not a great option.
No.
So I thought, but then you start, that was the first or second day. I remember telling my father, said it's all over.
Yeah.
But I said, and you start feeling better and you start running around a bit and you think, I'll think about it. But it was probably 3 months, it was probably July before it was completely healed. So I come back in July, played a couple of games. I was just starting to feel a bit confident, then I broke a rib. So,
that's right, yeah.
So then I come back and the last couple of games, I think 3 of my 4 last games were against Canterbury. So they weren't the easiest.
Your first game back might have been the semi-final, I think.
No, from my rib it was, yeah. And but the actual grand final started off well. I got stuck in a bad traffic accident. I reckon I might have been, 100 yards from where it was. But I think there might have been 15 or 20 cars ran up the back of each other. And I'm sitting there, because I had a history of cutting it fine. I'm thinking, this is going to be lovely. But
how late were you to the game?
Well, as it turned out, I was probably no later than normal, actually. I saw a bloke on the side of the road, and I said, mate, I shouldn't be here. And he said, look, I know who you are. He said, look, you get up, follow me. He said, I'll get you in front of the accident. He said, you can't see where you're going. But he said, there's no one in front of you. So he got me on the grass, got me around. Anyway, so I got there not much later than normal, but I think the rumour went around that I got a police escort.
Yes.
Jack Gibson said to me, he said, after you miss those first 2 goals, there's some Parramatta people saying those police should have minded their business. I said, don't worry, Jack, I was thinking the same thing. But yeah, there was no police escort. It was just one of the workers on the road got me around it. So.
Brett Kenny scored 2 tries in the 81, 82, 83 grand final. How special was he? What an amazing feat.
Well, look, I joked before, I used to say the game was too easy for him. And he loved the big occasions. I mean, he's just a great player. Look, and I'm not taking anything away from Wally Lewis, because we all know, but he played against Wally 13 times or 12 times for New South Wales. They won 8. When he played 5-8, they won 8. Yeah. But they kept picking him as in the centres. I thought, isn't it obviously sort of... Yeah. And I was actually talking to Andrew Johns last week, and we were talking about those sort of things. I said, how come they picked you as hooker for New South Wales? I said, it shows to me that New South Wales, they're arrogant. Yeah. Thinking... They are arrogant in the fact that I remember this year when Queensland won their first game, I had a bloke come in the pub. He said, we'll win the next 2. I said, that's the problem, mate. You don't think the other one offer a chance. Yeah. But Brett was just a natural. And if you go back and look at some of those videos, they might think it's an accident, but Jack got him back there in some of those games to take the bombs when the other side put them up. And You'll see games where he's caught him behind his try line or on the try line. One there, I think he runs about 30 metres after he catches it.
Peter Sterling was a completely different footballer to Brett, but together they just had it. And I don't know if I've seen a better 6-7 combination.
Well, Peter Sterling's what you call a footballer.
Yeah.
You know, he's not quick. He's not, but he could still run 30 metres to score a try.
Yeah.
You know, smart, read the game, kick, but he was just a footballer. And now I said, look, I don't know whether they paid better than they did in '86, but because I spent most of my time watching, I said I can't believe how good these two blokes are. And I said I never appreciated so much as watching them. When you play with them, you just think, oh, they're out there doing these things.
Yeah.
You expect them to do it. But watching them, that year, they were unbelievable that year. Yeah.
They as good as you've seen?
Look, it's not something I normally buy into, but you know they're in your side. You're going to win more games than you lose. And look, I never bought into that who's the best player, because I said on a given day they've all been the best player, you know. And
Great answer. I
used to joke once about I said, you give me my side, and we're playing a one-off game, and you said, but your halfback's Tommy Radonigas. I said, I'm going to fancy my chances, especially a one-off game, because whoever he's playing against is going to have a very unhappy afternoon.
Yes.
But, you know, the others might have, but so they're all different in different ways. But if it's a one-off game, you know, with Tommy in your side, well, all or nothing, it's going to be. The other mob aren't going to enjoy it.
No, they're not. So many superstars, but was Ray Price the backbone of that Parramatta side?
Look, I've always said about Ray can upset people. I always call him a narc, but he had 11 years there.
Yeah.
They made 7 grand finals. The year they didn't make the semis, he was injured for a good part of the back of that year with a knee injury.
1980.
1980, yeah. So they just don't realise that, and week in, week out, there was no difference between his good games and his bad games.
He was very consistent, wasn't he?
And just ruthless. It's just like today you could go and pick out all the stuff he did. You'd flick a button and it's all there. But if you could pick out some of the stuff, some of his tackles from bad situations where he's defending, he ends up hurting blokes. I don't know how. He'd turn a bad situation into a good situation for him. Run the ball, more skills than people think. He could pass and catch as good as any of them. But he did like to, and Jack always said, he doesn't really want to inflict pain, but he just thinks it's his duty. He would rather sort of go over them around him, but never enough credit for the effect he had on that side over 11 years. But his manner didn't make a lot of people like him at times.
Yeah.
But,
25 times you played for New South Wales, and interestingly, it was at this time you went from interstate football prior to 1980 to actual state of origin in 1980. How different was that?
Look, coming from the country, I know how Queensland felt, right?
Yep.
Because we come from country playing city. Queensland had hardly won a game for 20 years.
Yeah.
I'd played from 73 to 80 in those games, and even in 81 we played, never lost a game, never played in a losing game. So I could understand how they felt. And when they come up with the state of origin concept, no one knew what it was going to be like. You know, I think the money you got, the pay was for that game was, and that never worried. I was never about money for me, but I think $5,000 to the winners to be shared, $5,000
to be shared,
not $5,000 each.
Oh, wow!
And I think we would have got 2 days loss of pay. Now we were picked on the Sunday, played on the Tuesday. New South Wales did that till 1984. Okay. First year they went into camp, they won in 85, I think. I think the first year, even then, they had 2 camps of 3 days, Queensland, so their build-up was better. But I'll tell you how state of origin was different in those days. I got married on a Friday night, played for Parramatta on the Sunday and state of origin on the Tuesday.
Did you really? That's a big week.
Big week, yeah, big week.
Did you win the football games, by the way?
Wife said I went better at the football. We did win. I think we did actually. It was a state of origin, but I think we did win that one, actually, that game. And we beat Illawarra on the Sunday. But yeah, so that's how different it was. 1 year there, we went up picked on the Sunday, go up Monday.
Yep.
Michael Patterson was a 5'8".
Yep.
He couldn't get out of bed, and I think they flew someone up on the Tuesday afternoon to play. Got a bad infection, Michael, and play that night. So it was entirely different. So And Queensland was always more important. It was put on for Queensland, and I'm not knocking that. And it's more important for Queensland, and they've never forgotten. New South Wales win one or two, and we seem to forget. They haven't forgotten Queensland. When Mal took over the coaching, I don't know. I think New South Wales might have won the previous 2 or 3.
Yes.
And I always remember Mal saying, look, if Queensland get beat this year, I said this to Mal, he said, it could be the end of State of Origin.
Yeah.
I said, Mal, you won 8 straight. I never once heard you mention at the end of State of Origin when Queensland won 8 straight.
You had to motivate and inspire.
I said, but when you were looking at possibly your 3rd or 4th straight loss, it was going to be all over. But I never heard you once whinging. And to their credit, they haven't forgotten.
No, they haven't.
And it's bred into the players now, yeah.
Griffin Air Conditioning offers the highest quality of air conditioning sales and service across the Sydney metropolitan area, providing installation and maintenance to commercial, domestic and industrial customers. Working with this team, you'll be guaranteed the latest services, technology and developments in the industry. Visit griffinair.com.au and tell them we sent you for a cool deal. Game 1, it's a story you're probably sick of, but your Parramatta teammate at the time and your good mate Arthur Beetson put one on your chin.
Well, I suppose it looks that way. He came over the top, but I don't even think it knocked me off my feet, actually. I said, I've seen Arthur. If he'd hit me right, I said, I wouldn't have been standing there. I said, I think he might have went light, but he did come in over the top. But I think it's one of those ones that the main part of the arm probably wasn't hitting me on the chin. I wouldn't like to get hit on the chin by Arthur.
No one needs that.
I've seen him hit a couple.
It's an iconic moment, isn't it? Because 40 years later, people still talk about it and reference it.
Well, they do, and I find it hard and even Arthur used to joke. I don't know, there's footage of him somewhere because I always say, oh, my mother doesn't love you anymore. and he said it was an accident, Mrs. Cronin. He says it on this interview somewhere. Yeah.
If we're talking great teams in rugby league, where do you think the Eels side of the early 80s or 86 fits in? Can you compare eras? Can you?
I never tried it because that's what they are. They're eras. I saw Bart Cummings once talking about horses. He said you don't compare champions. He said just recognise them because they're never going to play against each other. They're never going to. Game's different. The rules are different. But what I'm saying is those players, you look at the players and you'd say how they'd go today, and you can honestly look at them and say they'd still be good players today.
You retired from rep footy, Mick, in 1982. You missed a 3rd Kangaroo tour. Do you regret that decision?
Look, I was talking to someone the other day about it, and I said, look, I arranged my wedding that year. That's going on the Kangaroo tour. I brought it forward to get. So you think back years later, he said, should I went, but I saw a State of Origin game the last State of Origin game in 1982. It was replayed, and I watched it. I said, now I know why I didn't go on the Kangaroo.
Really?
I was disgraceful. It would have to be the worst State of Origin game from both sides.
You've told me you've played a couple of disgraceful games. I reckon you're a hard marker on yourself.
No. But and I said, because I remember, and I was sort of going flat. The other thing, in 1978, I played 55 games of football.
Wow.
I wasn't the only one on that tour, but we used to get up and walk every morning at 7 o'clock. We'd train on the days of games, and I thought, if I go and do this again in 1982, I'll come back. And I was enjoying Parramatta. Yep. I was enjoying the club, players and Jack Gibson and all the young blokes. I thought if I go back and come back, I said I mightn't enjoy it. So, as I said, I arranged my wedding, but after that, but when I look back, I said, now I know why I didn't go. Yeah. Why I definitely, which made up my mind. Actually, on the day of after the grand final, one of the selectors come up to me and said, do you want to change your mind? I said, no, I'm not changing my mind.
Done.
I said, I've made the decision. And as I said, I thought that's it. I retired, but I got called back to I think they lost the first State of Origin game. They don't have a few injuries.
Yep.
And you weren't officially able to just say, I'm not playing anymore. No. It was part of it. So when they picked me, and it's funny, we won the first game, and I said, this is good. And the second game, we got to hide, and I said, Jesus, this isn't that much fun. But anyway.
Over the last year, it seems Cameron Smith has occupied more headline space in the newspapers than the royal family. Will he retire? Won't he retire? When does he retire? What's he doing? You and Ray Price got to live that fairy tale. You went out with a premiership, but you did it on your terms. Very special.
My eyes finished me, so that was my decision was made for me. I always thought I might come back and play a year in Gerringong, but I always thought Ray should have went again. But I don't know what he was thinking that day because the fact he come back 2 years later and went and played in England.
Yes.
I always thought, Ray, you should have played then and got it out of your system, and he could have played again. It's just like he's a couple of years younger than me. So he could have played again. He's got that mean streak in him, and that
he does.
But anyway, he decided to give it away, and as I said, we went out winners. I can't complain about that. But my decision was made easy because of the fact, the eye injury.
Did you ever get used to seeing Alfie Richards and company picking up Ray behind the try line?
The 86 Mad Monday, a few blokes kept reenacting it every day, and the thing about it, I don't even know whether Ray didn't always make Mad Mondays, but one of them would go down and they'd pick him up and he'd stagger. But look, there was a bit of a contradiction there. But he did put his head where you wouldn't put your feet at times.
Yeah. Coaching from 1990 to 93. How difficult was it coaching players that had been your teammates only a few years earlier?
My father wasn't the dumbest man in the world. And when I said I'm going to coach Parramatta, he said, you're going at a bad time. I said, look, I know that, but I said, look, in 4 years' time I mightn't want to do it.
Yep.
And in 4 years' time it mightn't be there.
Yeah.
They come and ask me. I didn't apply for a job. They come and ask me. So I said, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I said, you got a fair idea what football's about, and you look at the players. But I said, look, it's a chance. I'll do it now, and that, And
did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it. Yeah. I never enjoy getting beaten, but I enjoyed it. Don't take all the blame. And look, a bloke always wrote an article once that more or less got sacked, but they actually asked me to go back for another year.
Yes.
And probably got offered twice as much money, but they wanted me to spend more time in Sydney. They might have known I wouldn't take that. Maybe that's why they thought, we can offer him the world, he won't work. But I said, look, and I said, to be fair, these players need something different, and I probably need something, An
amazing time at the Parramatta Football Club. So much success in the early 80s, throughout the mid-80s. And I say this with complete respect, but the playing roster probably just wasn't up to matching it with the big guns.
Look, and I'm not blaming the players, but they probably made the mistake, Parramatta, where they thought every young junior coming through was going to be another Kenny, Ella, Growth, And they bought Sturlo from out, but they all thought, and even when I got there were some blokes on good money there, like scholarships.
Yes.
See, my first year on the job, they brought in the salary cap. So my first year at Parramatta wasn't of who I could buy, it was who I had to sack. Because they thought they'd get some dispensation, but they didn't.
Yeah.
And from at the end of 86, they'd signed some young blokes on
big bucks,
thinking they were going to be. So I had, and at the same time, blokes like Eric was struggling.
Yeah.
But injury, so I think they worked out a deal with them,
Can you believe all these years later, people are still comparing whoever the Parramatta halfback is to Peter Sterling? What an unfair comparison.
Well, it's unfair in all those things.
Yeah.
The last thing you want to see put next to your name is comparing it to some champion. Like, there's a couple of players in the playing now, and I'm not going to mention their names to a degree. Their only problems are that people in the media put bigger raps on them than they're probably entitled to.
Yes.
Well, we'll go with Hunt from St George. It's not his fault. They offered him 1 point, whatever they offered him.
I've had this argument so many times.
If he was getting $600,000 or $700,000, no one would be complaining.
The pressure should be on the guy that wrote the cheque.
But that's what I'm saying. And you'd think he was an idiot if he knocked it back. You can't blame him, but all of a sudden he's not Jonathan Thurston or Peter Sterling, wherever you like, Alfie Langer. They all criticise him. But as I said, someone's offered them the money, and that's the problem. They build them up, and they continually, like Moses at Parramatta, it's not his fault if he doesn't end up Andrew Johns.
Yeah.
But that's their problem. Luke Brooks, they put all these, they build them into bigger, then they can't wait to tear them down. It's one of my pet hates that these young blokes, and it's like some of the people get upset because they haven't lived up to their expectations.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Which are greater than a lot of other people's.
The Eels off the field, since the 80s, sadly, have rarely been out of the headlines for any great length of time. There always seems to be a boardroom fight, a split, a broken friendship. How hard is it watching a club you love continually implode?
Look, I'm a friend of Dennis Fitzgerald, so
Yep.
I got to. But look, they succeeded under Dennis Fitzgerald.
Yes.
And he might have misread a few things too. But the thing about it is quality of players probably.
Yep.
And you were never going to have the likes of Sterling, Kenny, and Ella there every week. But quality of players, and then see, I think the club was still run well, but the fact was they couldn't win a comp.
Yeah.
Now Brian Smith got close a couple of times, and then 2009 they got close. They had chances, but you just didn't win them.
Yeah.
But because they had that success, and I think you're not entitled to that success. You've got, but all of a sudden the fans think you aren't. So, and there's other people on the outside, and probably just genuine Parramatta supporters who look in and think, well, how hard is it to buy a football coach and enough players to win a comp? Well, some of those people got the chance to run the place and found out it's not that easy.
It isn't that easy. Do you still love the joint, the club and the colours?
Still, yeah. No, they're always good to me. As I said, I still follow them, and I get to a few functions, and if they want me to do something I will. Yeah, but no, they were good to me, so I can't, you've got to respect that and got to be thankful for that.
I've known you since the late 80s, and I finally get to sit here at your Gerringong hotel for the very first time. I've never been down here. How's the hotel going, and how's life in 2021?
Well, 21, it's only been a few days, but look, I'm living in Gerringong. That's what I always wanted to do, and it's been a tough year for everyone, but we can't complain realistically. There's people a lot worse off than us, in a world where it keeps changing every day at the moment. But no, I'm happy to be living in Gerringong.
You look back on the journey of rugby league very fondly all these years later?
Well, I've got to, all the things. I've got a lot of enjoyment out of the game. I met my wife through rugby league. Yep. Married the boss's daughter, actually. but I don't think when he saw me, he knew that was going to happen. I probably didn't either. But, look, very fondly. Look, as I said, I can remember my father taking me to a grand final in 56 to see Gerringong play. They make a lot of grand finals, Gerringong, so I've seen a lot of that, and and as I said, the enjoyment it's given to me, the people and the friends I've met and places I've been.
216 games for the mighty Parramatta Eels, 25 for your state, 33 for your country, and an amazing career. And you haven't changed a bit from the first time I met you, and that says so much about the character of a man. I grew up as a young Eels tragic, idolising you. In 2021 I do, but for very different reasons. Michael Cronin, thank you for your time. You, sir, are a legend.
Well, some people might think so. I have changed, and they might be right, but thanks very much.
A new episode of the Legends series drops every Tuesday and the weekly Wodge every Thursday. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening and follow us on social media at The Andy Raymond. Then you won't miss a thing. Come back soon, Legends.